change begins. Oh, he's dead.
Yeah, he's definitely... Nope, he's fine.
He's good.
Well, none of it's real anyway.
Hello, and welcome back to Mix Presents Sound for Film Awards Season. I'm Tom Kenny with Mix, and we're here today to talk about Spirited, Apple TV Plus holiday release, available now on the platform. And it's a retelling of A Christmas Carol, which we've all heard before, but it manages to put a unique spin on it. This is told from the ghost perspective, which we haven't seen before. And spoiler alert, they will break into song. We are joined by the Supervising Sound Editor, Andrew DeCristofaro, and re-recording mixer, Mark Paterson. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
I thoroughly enjoyed the movie. It's a whole lot of things. It's a comedy, it's a drama, it's heartwarming, it's funny, it's touching, and it's got great songs in it, great, very contemporary songs. That's a lot to sort of approach, and sort of establishing tone is one thing it must have to have done early. So by the time we get into the first musical number, we pretty much nailed it. Andrew, do you want to start off and sort of how do you establish that tone with sound?
That's a good question. Well, one of the things that the director Sean wanted to do was to make sure that we broke some of the traditional musical attributes, which is music starts and the world disappears. He wanted to have a kind of a more of a Broadway show feel to it, very live. So you felt the people in the room and you felt what was happening and so forth. So, So setting the tone for that, it starts out very dark and scary because we're in a cemetery and, we're Christmas past or things to come, I should say. And, and then we talked about Ghost World offline a few minutes ago. It's, it's kind of like a big factory in a way, old school. So there was old technology, new technology, magic, all kind of mixed in there. So it was fun to explore and say, okay, well, we're going to have some old, it was very like Brazil-esque in a way, where we had some old mechanical sounding things and typewriters and stuff that, but we had modern day computers and technology and, so the tone for the film, I mean, we got to go all over the map. So it's hard to say, there was no one scene. We're in England, we're in modern day, New York, we're in Ghost World, we're all over the map. But the tone of like the comedy and everything, I mean, I don't know exactly. I'm putting my hand up here, but because I'm rambling. So because the tone is such I'm trying to think of how to word that. What thoughts, Mark? I mean,
because in the mix, you bring a lot of the elements together. I mean, certainly the tone can be established with funny footsteps or things like this, but at a certain point, you have a drama and a musical here.
Yeah. All right. We'll go back into it. I mean, I think Sean very much wanted it always grounded in reality as much as possible, so we tried very hard to make everything feel real, even though we're dealing with ghosts and magic and so certain things. And each scene was, the tone of it, it's hard to describe what our tone was, Mark. I'm like, oh my gosh.
It's a funny one because if
it's so different.
If you watch, Sean's other movies, he knows how to put so much heart in a movie, and this is a perfect example of that. But there's also, the whole thing needs to come alive. It's a musical, and for me, it's about how do you blend those two worlds, and that's what gives you the journey through this movie, and that's what sets the tone. And the way he integrates those two things, for me, that was our kind of first challenge, is how do we approach that? How do we smoothly get between like this fun, large frame musical world and then back into this kind of reality of what's happening in people's lives. And I think that, from a director's perspective, that was handled beautifully.
And that's a good point, what you said there about the handing off too, because that was such a critical part of the songs and the world of keeping everything feel grounded and in reality, because we very much wanted them to, there's a lot of great scenes where they're talking in production and we had to get Mark had we had to transition into song and then back out within that song, back into production, and then back into song. And I think that the tone of it was that, in terms of making it always feel like it was organic and germane to the scene, and didn't just, okay, start the song. It was part of the scene from the get-go.
A good example of that, I mean, is the with the first Ryan Reynolds number, with the Christmas tree, Bring Back Christmas. That number, when the ghosts are sort of there to observe, they're just watching this guy. And Will Ferrell's getting excited, like, this is amazing. But we break in from an ordinary corporate presentation to a Broadway musical number that's big. I mean, is this the handoff we're talking about?
Yeah, and that's where it all starts. I mean, we talk a lot about that, Drew, before we start, don't we? We call it the transitions. How do you get from movie world to song world? Because what you don't want to do is break the spell, because then it brings the audience out in the movie. And, we have lots of different sources of audio, whether it might be a pre-record or production audio or, a studio recording for the song. And those things are worked out from the beginning, because for me, that's kind of like the first thing I have to get right, the way we move into the song. And then continuing to not break that spell, our theory on this movie was to keep the world alive. Let's break some of the traditional musical boundaries and not pull everything away. Let's use the sounds within the scene and make them as musical as we can, keep them in time, and make it just a continuation of the scene. And the same works when you come back out of it as well.
Well, my other favorite example was the song Good Afternoon, because not only have we left the sort of the modern world, we're back in 1800s England. We're on a busy street scene. I mean, could you talk to me about that scene then, Andrew? Because we got a lot of effects, we got a lot of music, and they're walking and talking.
Absolutely. And, back to what Mark said, we actually started on this project before it was even greenlit, talking about how we were going to make sure we got those seamless transitions in terms of mics. So when we did pre-records for the songs, we made sure we were using booms, lavs, other mic choices, so that we could, down the road, integrate, because not knowing what angle we'd be at the time for these transitions, we have that ability. But like you said, so 1800s England for Good Afternoon, it's a lush track when you hear everything, and, trying to find that balance of how much of the cobblestone and the horses, and that, it's no different than any other film in regard that you're trying to tell story with sound, and where should we be looking and how and what have you. And that's what we did with this. But all the tap dancing, all the, background people, I mean, all the tap dancing had to be redone, and we had to bring the tap dancers back into the Foley stage and be on different surfaces. For, I think we spent about almost 10, 11 days re-recording everything. Just for that alone. But it really was more of a balancing act, like Mark was saying, in terms of what do we want to hear? How much do we want to hear? Is it musical? Is it pitched right? Is it the wrong tone? Is it, so it was extremely challenging, very rewarding at the end of it. But
Mark, that scene, there's a lot going on. I mean, are you at a certain point then? Obviously, we want the music. Are you having to find sounds you can feature and then pull back other ones? How does that work at the mix?
I think it is that it's finding a way to let the music still be the star and let it be the driving force. But dipping in and out of these real world moments, and the tap is a good example. It's actually becomes a very important part of the music within the context of the scene. And when you take it away, you miss it completely. It becomes like a one of the rhythm instruments within the music, but it can't make the music feel small, and it can't take away from everything else that's going in the scene. So it just comes down to making choices, I think.
The right choices and picking the right sounds, in a sense.
Exactly, and Andrew and his team did such a great job. We had so many kind of options with the tap, whether we needed it to be heavier or lighter, or all of those things became so useful, because depending on what was happening in the scoring of the music itself would tell us which of those elements we needed to lean on. And it just worked out really well that we had such control over kind of different tonal elements of the tap dancing.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Bye now.